Welcome, everybody, to the From Experience podcast, where we learn from successful people's experiences. I'm Thomas Meister, co-founder and creator of the From Experience podcast, here with Eric Peterson. What's up, Eric? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm the other guy.
The other guy? Come on, man. You're probably doing some pretty awesome
Hey, I
things.
can relate, Eric. I'm usually the other nerd, so I relate with you.
You've got an awesome group of nerds, Deborah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll
hey,
go through the
today,
deep dive, and then I'll have to just follow that up with I'm the other one.
well, we've got Deborah Byrd, obviously, here on today's podcast. Deborah's the CEO, creator of Plug and Play Social Media. I asked Deborah to be on the podcast when we officially met. I think I've only ever followed you, Deborah, on social media, but we met at the Forward event that Neil Dingler put on over in Las Vegas, which was an epic event. So quick shout out. A lot of you missed out. And I just asked her, would you be willing to come on the podcast? I know a lot of people that work with Deborah, and I just know the difference that she's helping make in their businesses and in changing people's lives, because it's a valuable service, Plug and Play Social Media. So Deborah, I'm going to ask you kind of a corny question, a cheesy question that I like to say is kind of a stupid question, but I don't think, high level people such as yourself answer stupid questions with stupid answers. So who are you? What do you do for a living?
I'm just another imperfect person on this journey called life. And on the surface, we tell people we transform lives through media. So whether that's we create social media content through the vessels of top performing loan originators. And our goal is to help connect the families that need the transformation, need financial wisdom, to the loan officers that actually care. Again, that's on the surface. At the deeper level, we're transforming the lives of the loan officers, because your business can only grow to the extent that you do. And until you're comfortable with yourself and you can accept who you are and you love yourself, you really can't identify a personal brand. Or, a lot of times we see people who have taken other top producer goals, or maybe their branch manager's goals that's been projected onto them, and they just do what they think you're supposed to do, and yet wonder why they still feel that void. I call it a hollow victory. So we transform lives through media. It's not as sexy when we start with the core of the being, because most people resist that part. That's scary. That takes, growth and evolution. And we get to be on the first row seat with our loan officers and helping guide them. And, sometimes it's bumpy. Your first couple of videos or first couple of podcast recordings can be rocky, but that's everybody. So we just encourage everyone from the inside out, and hope to connect families that need good advice to the loan officers who care.
Very, very beautifully put. Yeah, I'll be a testament to that, because even just starting this podcast, I was like analyzing the shit out of it. Like, do I use this? What do I do here? Where do I record? And you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to make it better as I go. And nobody else cares. Nobody else notices, except Eric Peterson. He's already.
Typically, just so you know, just for full disclosure, typically about 10, 15 minutes before we're going to start the podcast, Tom will send something out. We're going to use this instead. We're going to do it this way. And look, I'm a creature of habit that likes to make sure that we have a couple of dry runs first, make sure it's as good as it can be. And I'm not really good when it's like, hey, we're going to do something completely different. So I always give them a hard time about it.
Well, this is me helping you, Eric. I'm helping get you outside of your box for the growth, right?
Well, actually, that leads me to a question to Deborah, if you don't mind me asking, is I have noticed that, you listen to how people feel about being on camera, whether they don't like the way they look, they don't like their voice. And I'm sure that's probably, if I were to guess, the biggest resistance that people have, at least in marketing and social media, things of that nature. I also remember seeing articles during the pandemic where everybody had to be on Zoom, where the amount of plastic surgeries went through the roof because people didn't like the way they looked on camera. Although most people don't have a good camera. So that's part of the problem. But
step one.
Yeah. But what are the things that you find, I guess, different ways that you can actually get people comfortable with? I mean, that's what you sound like and what you look like, right?
Well, to your point, that is why what we do, it's such an inside job. I mean, that's what I love about TikTok, to be perfectly frank, is TikTok is a place where adults can be kids again. That when you used to play and you would do an imaginative play, or when you're taking your first gymnastics class and they say, we need a volunteer, and like every kid raises their hand, it's like you have no fear of approval at that point because you're just a kid dreaming, and you dream as big as you can. But somehow along the way, we have adults or coaches or teachers or parents that have given us these limiting beliefs that keep people from actually being who they're meant to be, as imperfect as we all are. And that's why when you asked, who are you? Like, I don't know if anyone else has made as many wrong turns in their life. I mean, as I was trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up, which I still haven't figured that out yet, there was some painful moments. And I have a lot of empathy for those who, you get on camera. There's still times I get nervous, or I criticize myself, or I think, oh, that angle, I got my double chin, or, I happen to have an identical twin that, when you come from the same egg and the same DNA. And at the time we were both loan officers at the same company in the same area. She had 10 years experience on me. And I'm like, how am I going to differentiate? Like, why would someone choose me? I always felt like kind of the shadow, and I had to learn how to bust through that, and lots of behaviors that weren't great that I learned from, which is just my gift to give back to others, where I sometimes have to poke holes in that because I have beautiful people who tell me I just don't like the way I look. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Can we just look at you for a second? Like, you could probably show up with no makeup on and you're drop dead gorgeous. Like, I'm not even listening to you because I'm watching your mouth as you talk. And I'm like, wow, she's beautiful, And then I have people that, they may feel like I had one yesterday. She's like, I'm just a big girl. And I'm like, you know what? If you look at TikTok, you got some crazy people out there doing some funky dances and their bellies are hanging out, and they've got all these followers. And it's because people want real. They want authenticity. And even though we're at a time when we've never been more connected because of social, we've also seen the depression rates. And like you said, with plastic surgery, people are starved for true connection and intimacy. That's what's missing, is the relationship and the looseness of what a friend is or follower, so broad, where people are lonely. And so, it starts on the inside, and it's digging deep, and you've got to learn to forgive yourself. The whole Brad Lee approach, which anyone who was at the Forward event, or if you follow Brad Lee, he has 6 steps to this. And I would recommend follow him and adopt those 6. And it starts with the inside.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I mean, I'd love to ask you, Deborah, like the whole why you. We were talking a little bit before this about kind of your journey into this, which I realized we weren't recording, and I was like, oh shit, guys, why are we recording? Can you walk us through, I guess, what led you into the industry? Because I think that honestly, I've asked a lot of people and heard them even just tell me organically, and I don't think it's as interesting as your story. So I'd love to hear for you to share that.
So my sister and I, were identical twins, and we were actually delivery table surprised. So what that means is, there was only 2 sonograms back then. I say back then, it wasn't like it was that long ago. We are coming up on our 40th, but we were perfectly lined up. So our heartbeats were in sync, and it just looked like a shadow. And so all the way up until delivery, in fact, my mom was even water skiing at 8 months. And she was the breadwinner. Like, she was head of marketing for Xerox, head of sales, which was very abnormal back then. She was a model and just typical middle child and preacher's daughter from New York. So you don't tell her what to do at all. But so she had my sister, and then 12 minutes later, they were like, okay, here's baby A, prepare for baby B, maybe baby C. And it was about 6 months old, or when we were 6 months old, that my mom was then diagnosed with schizophrenia and stage 5 bipolar. And so, again, even back then, it was very rare for a dad to get full custody of girls. We have an older sister that's 4 years older. So a dad with 2 twins that were 6 months old and a 4-year-old. And he basically raised us like the boys he never had. I mean, we were very much tomboys, and he taught us how to work hard. I mean, before school, we played varsity basketball, but before practice, he'd be like, you have to shoot 50 free throws. You have to make the free throws. After practice, we were conditioning because we also played soccer and were Division, 1 champions on the soccer team. But during that time, I was the only one that really kept in touch with my mom. And I don't know what it was. She says I was the miracle sent from God, and he knew I was in her womb, and I would find rides because my sisters and my dad, he wasn't really supportive of us having a relationship with her. And so I'm talking like 4 or 5 years old, my grandma and grandpa would come in and take me to go see her, and there would be a red line and she'd be in a straitjacket, and it was, a mental institution or a psych ward. And the nurses would
It's
tell me how
wild.
she had, yeah. And so I became fascinated with studying humans and watching them all want the same thing and going about it in different ways. And then even mentally ill people, like when you talk about being privileged, when you don't have a mental illness, which is invisible, and you're forced to take medicine that doesn't make you feel well, it's hard. And then having empathy for my dad, who I truly believe he thought he was doing the best he could. He inherited $1 million, didn't pay inheritance tax, so owed the IRS over $250,000. So we went from being the richest kids to then bankrupt by 7th grade. So Denise and I had our first job in
Oh
7th
my
grade. We
gosh.
provided our own food. We bought our own yearbooks. Well, now college comes and we can't get student loans because my dad still owes IRS federal debt. So we went to college, we paid our own way the whole way. We worked 50 hours a week, went to school at night, studied in the middle of the night so we could graduate debt free. And that's what really led to the whole, how do we help families sooner? Like, what if my dad would have been given better advice? Like, what if there was a mortgage professional who, because most people don't have wealth to, they have a debt problem that usually they're trying to solve the debt problem to then create wealth. And so
Yeah.
how do you help families make better decisions? And, my story, I went into, my first degree was nursing. I wanted to be the Patch Adams of the hospital. And for those of you who don't know Patch Adams, that was a Robin Williams movie. And he focused on healing the human. And I wanted to specialize with kids. Kids don't love nurses with needles when they're sick. So I went the middle school route and I taught middle school science because that was the only subject you can blow shit up in a lab. And, it led to new experiments, and you could fail and just, find truth through experimenting, which I think is life. And I was a girls athletic coach. So I learned how to coach kids, and really it was just to build a relationship. And I've learned relationships to me are the ultimate trump card in any business or any relationship. When people feel uniquely seen or heard or understood or like they belong, it builds their internal security. And once you have that, then you can, minimize the external things that we rely on. So I ended up having 4 kids in 5.5 years. Yes, I know how that happens. Yes, I had to teach the unit to 14-year-olds. And that's when my twin was like, hey, have you ever thought about the mortgage business? And I was like, heck no, I am not a salesperson. And she was like, well, you are my number one referral source with the most closed deals every month. And it's time to put that natural connector in you to the space. And so the rest is history, I guess.
Wow.
I want to also
That was a
say real
long
quick
story.
that no, that's a beautiful story and crazy, and I think really makes you have to be grateful. Like, by the way, I saw a post, you posted about your mom recently, so I want
Mm-hmm.
to pray for you and pray for your family.
Thank
And
you.
you think about, she was a model, and she was what was her position at Xerox?
She was the head of marketing and sales. So, I mean,
Wow.
she was a big wig. I mean, and that was very rare back then, but she actually didn't want kids. She was very career driven, very creative, very spiritual, um, flies by the seat of her pants, didn't like to be constrained. My dad was always in and out of jobs, but, they say you can carry the phenotype of a mental illness, but traumatic stress can ignite the gene to then start showing. So,
Mm.
My dad was very abusive verbally and physically and cheating on her. And, it's a whole long story, but she survived and weathered a lot. And a lot of that's due to her faith. And, yeah, she's incredible.
It's amazing when you get to hear people's backstory. You
Mm-hmm.
get to kind of figure out not just what made them, but all the different ways your entire life could have been a complete 180 from being a successful person, right? I mean, you had a life that seems like most people would go down a really dark road, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's an impressive story.
Yeah,
Um,
that my biggest challenge was when people were going through those dark times of learning that I'm not the savior. And I always thought I had to be my mom's savior because she was going to commit suicide if I wasn't there by Saturday because she would wait on my drawings. And then my dad, who was holding on to guilt because of kind of what he had done with the family. And then he's running out of money and he's having to borrow from people. And he used to be idolized in the community, and people were starting to see his skeletons come out. And so I always felt like I had to be the glue for everybody. So it wasn't until I learned to be okay with not being perfect. And I kind of think that was God's way of giving me 4 kids when I was literally, doctors told me I would never be able to have children. And I'm like, I used to be the mom that every Lego went into the Lego bin. Every action figure was the action figure bin. And then when you have 4, I'm like, hell, we can just get out the door where everyone has shoes on. I don't even care if it's the same foot. Like, we have made it out the door and we are on time. Like, that's a win.
Well, yeah, and believe it or not, there's a couple parallels between us. So I'm actually a twin as well. Definitely not identical since I have a twin sister. But talk about like I know you were saying, the technology back then. I was actually positioned in a way where they knew there were 2 kids. They just didn't know the sex of either one of them. And they finally later on figured out that there was at least one girl. So my mom assumed that there was 2. But also, when I say I had, my wife gave birth to 4 kids in 2 years.
Wow.
Well, triplets. Whoa. So I believe me, I understand the struggle of, you know what?
And it was 1 and then it was 3, right?
It was 1, 3, and then 1 more.
Wow.
That's like total ambush, right? You think you're like going along all normal, and then you're like, oh, 1 kid. Oh, let's have another 4. It's like,
yeah. But you know what? It's kind of one of those things like people ask you, and I'm sure they asked you too. It's like, well, how did you do it? You don't have a choice. You just do it.
No.
What are you
doing? What was crazy is, my sister was never told she would have issues, and she had tried for 4 years, and and she would be okay with me sharing this, but she had to do in vitro. And I mean, I had gotten to the point where like, it was like post-traumatic stress when I would go to the OBGYN's office. Cause I'm like, if you tell me that there's a heartbeat in there, like, cause we were both teachers at the time. He coached baseball and football, which in Texas, that's 7 days a week, and taught honors calculus. So he's a math wizard, but it was 7 days a week coaching. And here I had a 3, 2, 1-year-old, and I'm in the mortgage business. He calls me and says, hey, you've got 5 minutes to make a decision. I just got my dream job offer to be the head baseball coach, but we'd have to move to Houston. And I'm the breadwinner because I'm now in mortgage. And I'm like, we have a 3, 2, 1-year-old, a newborn. I'm due in 30 days. We'd have to get a new OBGYN, a new pediatrician, sell a home, buy a home. And I don't know anybody. But I was like, but if there's anyone that knows how to reinvent themselves, and if you sink or swim, like, we never had the option to sink. It was always swim as hard and as fast as you can. And our dad kind of bred us at a very young age to always outwork your talent, and nothing beats hard work, and it has to be consistent and over time. And so we're all overachievers. I think that's because that's how we received love from him, is when we achieved. But, I mean, it's good, and it was messy at times, but I've learned to be very grateful and appreciative for all of those moments when I wondered how in the world were we going to, put food on the table when I'm a senior. Like, we literally got off the bus. We were seniors in high school, and all of our stuff were on the front yard. And we hid it because we were embarrassed. And so we got in like poor housing. My sister and I got an apartment, just she and I. And I'm like, how did 2 blondes, like, in a cheap apartment, barely able to like drive the car to school? And nobody would have known because we were good at wearing the mask, because my dad taught us that you don't ever ask for help. Everything's okay. You make everything perfect. And, so learning how to get past being the savior and pretending everything's perfect. I think that's why I love what I do the most, where I'm constantly looking for that vein for people and like following it to their heart and really figuring out what's inside them, like what really matters to them. That's what I care about.
What's interesting is I actually, I love talking to people about social media, because I'm not very good at it, and I still try, but I want to know what people's hangups are, like why they don't do it, why they're now getting into it. And everybody believes that, it's vitally important to their business. And I get it, to, create awareness, stuff like that. But it's funny how sometimes the perceptions that you have of what people are doing can affect your opinions of them, right? And I'll give you perfect examples. Like, when I see a bunch of people doing a ton of videos on LinkedIn, and they're talking about, the mortgage business specifically, I'm like, most of the people that are on here are mortgage professionals. So like, who's your audience on here, right?
Right.
But then again, you also look at it, well, maybe it's not about the content, it's about exposure, right? So I just asked people about that. And so I have actually 2 questions I'm going to ask you. One was, Obviously aside from the, people getting over the hurdle of what they look like, what they sound like, one of the most interesting comments I heard somebody say was, why would anybody want to hear what I have to say? Right. And I said, well, obviously, beside why most people do it is to just create awareness of who they are. I said, the value that you bring in your industry is specifically that people need to hear what you have to say about what your experience is. Because what we talked about at the very beginning, which was I think most people in this business have just been doing this so long, they don't realize what average people just don't know. And so we go, they understand this is what they need. We're going to give it to them versus educating them on what do you need now? What are you going to need later? And overall, what's the legacy you want to leave behind? There is very little education around that. Right. And so how do you specifically, if somebody says, I don't know what to talk about, I don't, it's almost like a negative view on themselves, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough. Like, how do you engage with them on getting them over that hurdle?
Well, I literally spoon feed my clients. So every Friday I do a coaching email and I include, it's basically a playbook for the following week where I consume, if you ask me anything about marketing, mortgage, real estate, psychology, or just human beings, that's all I study. It's like the air I breathe. You ask me about food or travel, I'm clueless. Like I don't watch the news. I have no idea what's going on in the world. But when you ask me about
the Kardashians or whatever the new, they call it something else now, right? Whatever.
No, in fact, Denise will even like she'll tell me certain things, and she's like, "Do you not watch? Like, do you turn the TV on?" I'm like, "No, I was just watching literally Mortgage Coach YouTube channel, the one that I was on, and I'm making my minute marker notes because I study the market so that I can be like the Cliff Notes version for my clients because I do have the opportunity to have some incredible webinars throughout the week. And I'm extremely grateful for the abundance of some of the professionals we have across the country that I package it into small bite-sized pieces. And I say, okay, here's your playbook for next week, Monday through Friday. And that's the first test where if I say, okay, here's your script, like hook, problem, solution. I have all the how-tos. I do the, different content calendars for the week so that you have a good diversity of some personal and some business. But that's when I know, one, who are the doers and who are the ones that still need some inner work to be done. And sometimes it's just a how-to. Like you'd be surprised. There's some people that when we meet, they're like, Deborah, I don't even have Instagram. Like, I don't even know how to upload a post. I'm like, that's okay. I got you. Like, I remember what that was like when I first started off and I could barely spell mortgage. So, this is one thing I can help you with. But I will say some of the excuses of, well, I don't like the way I look or I sound. I'm like, I'm just not buying that anymore. For some of you, I just don't think you're studying your game where you don't have much to say because you're not taking the time to be a practitioner and studying the market, studying what does the historical data show of what's going to happen with housing or interest rates when we hit a recession, and what's your opinion on it and what are you basing that opinion off of? Like, you have to be the most knowledgeable person in the room. And as much as I'm that vessel every week to give them those Cliff Notes versions, when you have knowledge, to me, at the core of why we all exist is to learn and to serve. The more that I learn, there's more people I can serve. So if we would just switch the paradigm of using social for good, and that the new version of you could be teaching the old version something that you didn't know, like, to me, how can you not feel convicted to share that when it may transform just one life if you went on camera and were willing to share it? So whether you do or don't, your competition will, and someone else will end up following that person, buying from that person simply because they were willing to put themselves out there and you were not. So it's like, choose your hard. It's hard to be broke with no deals, but it's a lot harder, or it's hard to go on video and to do social media, but it's a lot harder to be broke and not have a pipeline. And if you care about people, and that's what most of my clients tell me, they're like, well, I really care. And I developed the experience. I'm like, if you do, then why would you keep it a secret? Just because you can't help people nationwide? Like, do you think if we went back and said, all right, if Jesus Christ lived today, do you think he'd be like, no, I'm not going to share my message today on social because I may get a hate comment. I don't want to do it. Or do you think Jesus would share his message and his truth because he owned it and felt like it could be good for somebody? So when I hear that, or I'm not good at it, I'm like, were you good at kissing when you first started? or anything else? Did you stop trying just because you weren't good at it? You were fearful?
I'm just kidding.
So it's like,
I was
it
born
just
great.
goes back to, what do you really value? It's like, yeah, we're all scared at first. We all suck in the beginning. Like, where do I put my hands? What about my nose? Like, I won't go into all the details, but it's like, you didn't stop trying.
Yeah, it's like learning to ride
So
a bike. Yeah. Yep. You gotta keep
yeah,
doing it.
Now that since you're a captive audience, and I've never been able to ask an expert this question, here's something that I cannot get myself to do. And if it's okay to do it, maybe I'll try it. But
yeah.
if somebody puts a post out there, regardless of what they put it on, right? What's the rule about liking your own stuff? Because I find it awkward, but if
Mhm.
you know what I mean, like if I'm going to put up a post about something that happened or something great and then immediately be the first person to like it, I don't know why I find that weird or odd, but I do. If Tom puts something that I'm in, like we
I
do
would
a
never do
podcast
that. I
together,
would never
I'll
do
like
that.
that all day long. But if I put one, I don't know. I feel weird about it, but what say you?
I'm probably not the best one to ask, because I'm the person who will post something and never look to see who likes it. Because again, I think when you can get to the point of such internal security where you don't care if anybody likes it, or if someone judges you for liking, my own post or not, it's like you get to the point where you're literally creating the content because it comes from a pure motive. And that is the one thing that I have to dig deep on for people. And I don't care what it is. I'm like, look, there's no judgment. I've been there, done that too. But some people are comparing themselves to people who have paid for followers or paid for likes, which I'm like, it's just not real. And at the end of the day, what are you really doing this for? Is it to be famous? Is it to appear like a big deal? Because I'd rather you just be a big deal if you are. And so it's funny you even bring up the likes, because we just did a study from 2019 to now, and the number of people who are liking and commenting has almost cut in half. I don't know if you've seen any of these reports or not, but they were showing that most likely due to COVID and the amount of screen time that increased over time, humans, our behavior, we become lazy. So it's not like, if you're seeing a decrease in likes and comments, know that that's normal, because now people are consuming screens almost in a replacement of TVs, radio, it's everything. And so we're just not liking and commenting as much because it's more in our normal day-to-day practice. It's like when you have adults that don't wet the bed, it's not like you're like, good job, I'm not wetting the bed, you didn't have to wear a diaper. It's like it's expected at that point. So you've seen a huge decrease in likes and comments, and so many people allow that to affect their mental game of like, oh, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore. I've tried it. I've posted every day for 30 days. I don't have any new followers. In fact, I've lost followers. And so they think I'm just going to get off of it. And that's where I challenge people on motive of, then why are you doing this? Like, what are you truly trying to do? And just be real with yourself. And those are those, BS stories that I try to break through with people. And again, I don't care what it is. I mean,
And I love, by
I
the
just
way,
want it
I
to be
love
real.
that message of purpose, because look, sometimes and look, I'm not going to, I like to believe that I'm not a judgy person, but I know I am,
Oh, we all are.
but when you
Yeah.
see, like, I care about like why people do things, mostly if it's
Yes.
like, if there's something that adds value to other people, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like when somebody goes, oh, I can't believe like I got a flat tire, and then they take a picture really far away of their Lamborghini. It's almost like a look at me, right? And it's not about the flat tire. Otherwise, you just put got
Yeah.
a flat tire, bummer of a day, something like that, right? And I don't like reading into that stuff, but I know that I do sometimes. But
Mm-hmm.
what I love that you said was, I truly believe that if you are adding something that you believe is going to add value to others, and that there's a purpose behind it, you're not really going to care who comments on it, who looks at it, because you put the purpose out there and let it do whatever it's going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who was it at Forward? I think it was it Ed Milet or Bradley that was talking about stop getting people to, understand or to believe what you're saying. Just get them to believe that you believe in what you're saying, right? Like,
Right.
I think that, and
That's
I
why it
personally,
goes back to
good.
it goes back to the Jesus example. Like, was he always understood? And did and I'm not a super, religious person. I'm spiritual, but my dad, that's a whole nother story we won't get into. But no, not everyone agreed with him. And his way was not forced. You had free agency and free will to choose, but it was never in a, to make you feel inadequate, or he didn't lead by fear. And so to me, if you're learning something every day, which we all are, whether it's about ourselves or something that we're studying, it's out of a book that you're reading, like it doesn't just have to be in your space. Whatever you learn, when you choose to share it, you're now serving others, and people have the right to block you, to restrict you, to not follow you. And that's what we have to remember is people can choose whether or not they want to see our stuff or not. And it's a good filtering system that maybe if I don't resonate with you, because I'm a little bit rougher around the edges than even my sister, I color outside the lines a little bit, and not everyone's going to, gel with that. That's okay. It allows me to learn that, and they can go find maybe the channels that they could benefit from. But I'm not always understood. Heck, I don't always understand myself and why. Like, I know I shouldn't eat Oreos at night. What was I doing last night? Dunking my Oreos. And I'm like, this is not what I should be doing when I want to lose weight and be healthy. But what is it about? I'm like, and I'm even telling myself I shouldn't be doing this. But boy, does it taste good.
Yeah. I got targeted on Instagram by a cool little gadget. It's like a magnet thing. You put it on the side of the cup and you just lower the Oreos into the milk. Check it out.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to check it out.
For anyone listening, there you go. That's what you really got from this podcast. I was going to briefly mention my own, I feel like, journey, going out to the Forward event. I feel like, guys, that's coming up a lot. But, I do think a lot of the times, like, I want to be really mindful of what I'm saying, probably more so because I care what people are going to think about what I'm saying. And the truth is, Eric, you kind of made me remember this, is all those people that, those experts that we see posting on social media, doesn't matter who they are, real estate, mortgage, etc., whatever industry, who gets to say that they're the authority? Like, you have to post, and the people who care about your message will listen, and the haters are going to hate anyway. So just post. Like, I definitely want to make sure that I'm doing a better job of conveying, like, documenting. That's what Gary Vee, I think, was talking about a lot, was like that we need to document more. I wanted to ask you, Deborah, I wrote down this question, like, we believe in something here called the hard right thing, which is we don't just do the easy, wrong thing. But as that pertains to sometimes just having to be honest with your clients, right? Some of those people who maybe aren't either, they're struggling or their messaging isn't very good. How do you coach, some of your clients or, people that maybe you're interviewing, like, do I want you as a client? How do you help some of those people with, like, telling them maybe what they don't want to hear, but what they really have to hear or need to hear, should hear?
Well, so on the discovery call, as much as they're interviewing us, usually I'm interviewing them to see if it's even a good fit, because the types of messages that we create are very mortgage strategy. It's not your cookie cutter typical loan post that, most, and nothing against big marketing departments. I used to run a big marketing department, and usually what I found is people who, even when you gave the content, they wouldn't post it even if you made it for them. And then the big producers don't want what everybody else in the company is posting. So the amount of different content streams I have to create for every region and every zip code so that nobody's on the same content thread is a lot. But we make sure it's positioning you, kind of back to the judgment comment. Typically when people land on your feed, less than 4% of your audience is ever going to see an organic post. There's 5,300 posts every second. So there's a lot of noise on social media. I don't think the answer is being louder. I think it's being more valuable and having something to say that's going to create impact. So when we're creating content, when I'm talking to clients, I'm really assessing, are you a loan officer that is in business to help people and to help create generational wealth through finance as well as memories? Because is what the home represents. Or are you like a one and done? And it's okay. There's two different types of ways to do business, transactional or relational. I just know the types of clients that are going to do best with what we do are the relationship driven people. So once we've established that and they've become the client, it's then creating trust where they feel safer and safer to expose to us. So I do think sometimes they see me and I'm on, so many webinars, and they kind of feel like I may judge them. And I'm like, listen, I will share all my dirty laundry with you. When I was starting off too, like I had done this and I totally messed this up. And that's why I love helping, is because I've been there, done that, and worn the t-shirt. And I'm like, there's literally no judgment from my end. There's probably not anything anyone could share at this point that would shock me, just because, for a small period of time, I was the CEO of a family law firm. So I literally sat and did divorce consults and custody battles for 2 long years and heard it all, let me tell you. But once you have trust, it's just like when I used to teach middle school. I mean, I used to say, give me all the kids nobody else wants, because I will turn them into rock stars. Once they believe in themselves, it's like a superpower, and it's a gift that just ignites them through their life. I mean, it can really change the trajectory of a kid's life. And for some, I'm like, you know what? Video may not be your thing until, like, if you show up on video and there is no energy and it looks like you hate your job, like, I'd rather you not go on video yet. And, right now the big thing is reels, and I'm seeing everybody just wanting to focus on reels because it's the new trend. I'm like, you still have to create graphics that are screenshotable and shareable, because not all learners, like, I don't personally want to watch a video over and over and over that everybody's now using the same music, the same captions, the same type of captions, the same types of emojis that come in. I'm like, now you're just like everybody else. And that's what happens. And that's why
Trying to be
TikTok
loud.
was so popular is, it's like, don't just be louder in a noisy space. Be true to who you are in the moment, with giving yourself permission to continue to grow and say, okay, that may have been me last year, but now I'm this person. So I may need to reintroduce myself. And we all have permission and freedom to continue to be our best selves. But, we all are our own worst critics and judge ourselves. Like, there's no one looking at your content more than yourself. I'll
I
just say
agree
that.
with that. But to your point, it's very interesting to see people that are completely in their element and using something that they really enjoy. Like there's this one guy that on his social media posts, he starts out just like playing an electric guitar, and typically the title of whatever song he's playing is going to relate to a topic that he's going to discuss, right? But when I see his post, I'm like, that's amazing. Like he's confident enough to just do it and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
But I had somebody call me, the other day, and they told me that they felt guilty about how much money that they've made in this business over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it for a little bit, and the question I asked was, do you feel guilty about how much money you've made, or do you feel guilty about how much value you created for the money that you got paid? Right. And so to pretty much everything that you've talked about is, instead of just giving people what you can give them and that's it, figuring out the long term, which is, I think people don't even know that they want it. People don't even know that they need it.
Right.
But it is in my opinion, somebody being successful through significance in other people is so much better than, being successful by being selfish, and I truly believe that's what a relational person will do. But if somebody has a transactional mindset, that's all you're ever going to get from them.
Well, and what's so hard to witness, and it's almost like I have this sixth sense of empathy where I can like feel people's pains, and I'll talk to clients and they're top producing. From the outside, you would think they're killing it. Lots of deals done. They're all over media. They have a beautiful family. They travel all the time. And it just feels like they have it all. And then behind the scenes, you learn that they're suicidal or they attempted suicide. And it's when the market was at the peak. And you're like, how could this person, like, what is it within them? What are they searching for? And when is it ever going to be enough for them that they would feel that bad to want to even commit suicide? Like, so you just never know. And that is the one danger with social media, is perception is reality. So there's some new LOs that think, I'm just going to rent a Lamborghini and get a helicopter and stage all this stuff to, again, look like a big deal. But over time, it's a hollow victory, because yourself, you're kind of a fraud. And so when people don't document the journey and they can't tell you how many calls it takes to get an appointment, how many appointments lead, and just know their conversion, then in the mind, psychologically, we tell ourselves this was just luck. And you don't give yourself credit for being the valuable advisor that you are. And so you just keep thinking, I just need to produce more. I need to produce more. And then your wheel of life is so lopsided where you're overcompensating in work, but yet the very people you say you do this for, which is your family, get the worst of you every single day. So it's like, why are you really doing this? When you work 18-hour days, you make plenty of money. What is it that you're searching for? And so that's where, when I have permission and I've been in my clients' lives for a certain amount of time, I'm like, there's a void there that you're trying to fill with work. And again, I don't care. Maybe you want to be the richest money and have 5 girlfriends at a time like my dad did. And again, it's like, you do you, be honest about it, whatever. But let's get to the root of it. What are you really after? Are you living a life of significance? Because I can tell you from visiting my mom in that assisted living place, how precious time is, and what people remember about you is not about how many loans you do or what even advice you gave. It's how you make them feel. And again, people want to belong. They want to feel like they're a part of something. They want to give back, but they tell themselves, nobody wants to hear me. What am I going to share? What have I been through? Oh, then I'd have to expose I went through maybe a divorce or whatever it could be. And people just don't want to give that up because of that fear of approval. So that's why we've got to do the inner transformation. And it's scary. Like, I mean, it felt like soul surgery of just pouring salt in wounds. I'm like, gosh, and I was resistant. I'm like, no, I just give. I'm just a giver. Like, I really thought in my mind, like, you couldn't tell me any different. I'm like, wait a minute, that's actually not true. Because why am I getting upset when I'm giving, and I'm, the person's not nice to me back, or they snap at me. And I'm like, well, I'm really just trading. And that's what most of us do, is we just trade, but we think we give. And it's like, no, there's still a little bit of expectation in return, because we aren't unconditional beings. There's only one unconditional being. And we all have certain conditions before we're like, all right, that's it, but we tell ourselves, oh, I love him unconditionally. No, if he were beating you every day and cheating on you, I don't know if you'd be that unconditional, right? Like, so it's just being honest with ourselves, which is hard because we've built these walls of beliefs that just aren't real to you, but they may not be real. So it's shattering through those.
I love that. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really have good information. I mean, you could just say within the mortgage industry, right? There's no training to be a loan officer, right? Most people are just making it up anyway. But then you expand that into life, right? There's not a lot of great places where you learn to be a good human being, I think.
Yeah.
And, I first heard one of the co-founders of Neo, actually, Danny Harani, say this, which is, you could have all the money in the world, right? And this is exactly what you're talking about. Those people, renting a Lamborghini, a helicopter, or whatever. Like, you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have time, it means nothing. But take that one step further, right? Because if you're just faking it, right, and it's false, it's not real, you could have all the money and all the time in the world, but if you don't have any energy, it's also meaningless. And nobody really has the information or a blueprint or a model or has been taught, like, this is a better way. And when you do it a better way, I'm biased, I'll admit it, I think you get not only a better outcome, but you feel better about it, to your point, Deborah. So I think that's prolific. I think more people should subscribe to it. Just kind of shake them and realize that, come on, guys, like, you got to do a little better. Like, stop trading in, just money and time as currencies. You need to trade in energy as well.
So true. And I can't remember which one of you said it, but about being the expert, I'll say, I think most people get stuck in, I can't hit record until I'm an expert. And there's a difference between being the expert and being perfect. And again, it goes back to my story of wearing that fake mask and looking like Ken and Barbie with all the kids and, having all my shit together when it was like blowing up behind the scenes, until I was willing to really expose that. And some of it was my own insecurity with comparing myself to my twin and being an extension of her brand. But I cuss a little bit. She doesn't. And she's, so I thought, I can't be me, because then people are going to judge her and they're going to think she's like me. And I don't want them to think that, because I put her on a pedestal, so I had my own toxic things of just being compared your entire life. That's like, okay, which one of you has the wider nose and which one of you is the better basketball player? So you think you have to be just alike. That it took conditioning and time for me to be like, wait a minute, no, we're different. And those differences are what make us beautiful. And we all have permission to be imperfect. And hopefully we can give ourselves enough grace and mercy like we give to everybody else so freely. That's like, you know what? I'm just going to hit record, even though I have no makeup on. I have half of fake lashes hanging off my eye, but like, I look like Albert Einstein when I wake up in the mornings. I'm a hot sleeper and my hair is not straight. It's like nasty curly and it's a hot mess express. But you know what? it's real. And it's like when you show up and you maybe make a recording and you're imperfect on your words, you just allowed someone else permission to be imperfect when you do that. So every time you make a piece of content, what I tell people to focus on is, how is this going to benefit somebody else? Not the hook bait, not the, I'm going to write this hook that's just going to get people to click and then they're going to be disappointed. Because I will tell you, we are seeing a marketing shift right now. It's a big rebellion where people don't want to be marketed to. They're paying more than ever in ad blocking services like through Hulu and Spotify. They don't want the bullshit anymore because they've clicked on it too many times of this captivating hook, all to be disappointed by the end. So you can't do that anymore. And now consumers are exposing truth because we can write our own reviews. We can write, oh no, this lender says client for life. That's just a sales gimmick because they're just trying to get your business, because now consumers have a voice. So there's no more the days of lies and manipulation, to be perfectly honest, of marketing are ending. And so you've got to get truthful, and however you are on and off the stage or the field has got to be the same person, because in a time when there's never been more distrust in the whole world because of COVID and fake news, and people just aren't super trusting, and they really, maybe shouldn't be, because we have marketers, or there weren't agencies that would, or ethics. You look at AI now, like I went to a seminar for marketing AI, and the way that Amazon is working on reading your emotional state to then price gouge certain things. I mean, it's kind of crazy of how much can be controlled. I know and there's no ethics around it. So like, at what point, where's the limit? Even to your social feed, the social feed knows exactly in what order, what to show you to keep you on the platform, because it's just trying to feed the addiction that you take kids who may go through a breakup and they're getting all these depressing things sent to them and they wonder why they're suicidal. It's like, so you have to have limits and have those times where you get right at the core.
It's funny.
We're gonna wrap up here in a minute, so go ahead, Eric.
Well, good thing, because this is completely irrelevant to everything we've been talking about. But one of the funny things is that becomes an irritant to me is I'm not on like social media very often. It's just I don't like my phone, right? But that being said, I was flipping through and I was watching, I think, one of the, I'm gonna sound like a dork because I don't know what they are, but like on Instagram, like when you click on somebody's face and it shows a video or something or whatever.
A reel?
Oh, the stories.
Oh, stories. There you go.
I think you're talking the story.
Yeah. So I clicked on that of somebody I knew, and then it would just kind of flip through some random stuff, right? And I clicked on this one because it looked funny. I think it might have been a TV show or something, but then it was in Spanish. I'm like, well, I don't speak Spanish. And I flicked it, and ever since then, everything I get is in Spanish. And I don't understand how to fix that. So the algorithm today don't always work.
Yeah, no, now you're
well,
stuck.
It's because you're not on social very much. So the real embarrassing moments is when we do discovery calls and some dude is like, okay, can you help me? I'm on Instagram. And all of a sudden his feed, it's like a bunch of half naked chicks and golf. And I'm like, I'm not, a rocket scientist, but I would think like the platform's trying to show you things that you typically like to look at. And there's a lot of half naked chicks and some golf stuff. And he's like, oh no, I don't know why.
I don't know why. Either. Hey, no judging, but maybe to Eric's point.
Yeah. Oh, we all judge. Oh, yeah.
Judge? Yeah. Well,
all right, bring it home, buddy.
Well, I'm gonna bring it together because Deborah, perfect doesn't exist, and in the pursuit of better is how we should live. That it started out as the tagline for this podcast, actually. So you just said it perfectly. I want to make sure that anybody watching this gets the chance to connect with you. So what's the best place if somebody's interested in starting the journey of, finding their authentic self, interested in maybe working with you? Where would you kind of call them to?
I follow us on Instagram. That's where I am most of the time. So if you go to plugandplay_SM, so someone hacked my original account. So just y'all keep that in mind. And then also, my personal one is Deborah A. Byrd, spelt like Deborah, and Byrd is spelt Byrd. But either one of those, the business one is where you're going to get more tactics of different updates and strategies and hook examples. And the personal one, I throw a little bit more psychology in there and kind of the real shit show of Deborah Byrd sometimes. Tune in as you like.
There you go. Well, post, 12, 15 times a day, Deborah? Is that what Gary Vee just told us to do? Is that what you're coaching your clients on doing, documenting more?
Nope.
Nope.
No, because if you put out, if it's not done through the right coaching, then you start to teach the algorithms that nobody cares about your stuff. So it's really important to understand the science and the strategy behind that. In theory, you can build up to it, but if you're doing 12 posts a day and no one's looking at your stuff or engaging with it, and you're not engaging, because the worst thing you can do is post and ghost, then you're teaching the algorithms not to show your content to people.
It's learning,
So it can work against
about you, and it's like, well, people don't want you, and I can't feed their addiction if I show them your stuff. So there you go,
Right.
guys. Reach out to Deborah if you want the tricks and you want to get started, so people actually watch your shit and don't ghost you. So if you got something out of this, guys, give it a like, share it with somebody who also could benefit from this. Thank you so much, Deborah. Really appreciate for you making the time coming onto the podcast.
Tom's going to post this 12 times.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, and thank you for doing what you guys do. I mean, this is a way that you guys learn and you serve. So thank you for being such a great example.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.